Welcome to episode 487 of the Barcelona Podcast, brought to you by the Blue Wire Podcast Network. I'm Dan Hilton. He's Levon, a.k.a. Barcelona, and we actually have a ton on tap today. Quite a few different little mini topics to work through as a stomach bug canceled the first preseason match and left us with everything but a game to actually talk about. And since it's been a few days, there's plenty of news since the last time I talked. So, Levon, are you ready to go? Are you in off-season form, or do you think you're in preseason form, or are you in, full season El Clasico, March? Let's go.
Hot time, summer in the city. I'm sweating my off. It definitely is not pretty.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. This humidity here on the East Coast in the U.S. I mean, it's like not say I'm jealous even of the dry air that exists. We were out west, my wife and I, last week. That's why I had pre-recorded stuff. So I felt like, as hot as it is, you're closer to the sun in altitude, but like it's not humidity. Humidity it kills me. And so I don't know. I'm a little jealous of any place with just a dry heat.
Same here, man. Same here. It's Barcelona. It's past 11 right now, and I'm still sweating.
Yeah, nuts.
Yeah.
Okay, so 4 guys who are going to be sweating as leaders this year. That's a weird transition, but we're talking about captains as our first thing here. Sergio Roberto, Ter Stegen, Ronald Araujo, and De Jong in that order. So first off, with those 4, how you feeling about that?
I'm happy for Ter Stegen is first captain now, or
Second captain. It's Roberto, Ter Stegen, Araujo, De Jong in that order.
Okay. Huh.
But Ter Stegen he really.
Ter Stegen is going to be first captain in most of the time, but still weird.
Time. Exactly.
Still weird for Sergio Roberto to be captain. Frankie De Jong, I'm not sure if he's captain material. There's one thing that I think he still does, where if he makes a mistake, he needs like 1 second of whining before he reminds himself, "Hey, I shouldn't whine. I should play." And that's not what I would like to see from the captain. We all know that Araujo is the real captain. Like, whoever they put the armband on, Araujo is like the reincarnation of Carlos Puyol. So I'm very very happy, or at least I would have been very disappointed had he not been one of the captains.
Yeah, I think the club did the right thing because he's in theory he's too young or not tenured long enough. But again, nobody in this club has been there for that long at this point because of who's left. So yes,
it's not the club's decision though. It's they voted for it. The players voted.
The players, right? And I'm saying the players haven't been in the locker room long enough themselves to say, "Hey, this player's been here for this long and longest tenured, so it has to be this guy." These players generally have arrived in the last 3-4 years for the majority of the club. So yeah, I mean, Ronald Araujo is the choice. I think they're right there. And it's interesting too because last season Barca started the year with 4 Catalan captains. Now it's just 1, and it's the main captain, Sergio Roberto, that'll rarely be on the field. So after
Roberto, right, because last year was Piqué, Puyol, not Piqué, Puyol, Piqué, Bussi, Sergio Roberto, and Jordi Alba, right?
Correct, to start the year, right. And then Ter Stegen took over for Piqué. But after Roberto leaves then, which you expect would be the next 2-3 years, unless they make Oriol Romeu a captain for a year or Eric Garcia, there won't be a Catalan captain of the 4 since I believe they started having 4 captains. I was looking back, and I don't think they've ever gone with when they started having 4 captains without a Catalan in there. Because I was looking back, and even the last first captains, they were Busquets, Messi, Iniesta, Xavi for a season, Puyol for 10 seasons, Luis Enrique for 2, Sergi Barjuan for 1, Pep for a few seasons, Jose Maria Baquero for 4. In the 96-97 season,
Baquero's not Catalan.
No, he's not. I'm not naming Catalans. He's okay. Basque. I'm going through the first captains even. But that season, he shared the first captaincy, that being 96-97, with Jica Poseu, the Romanian defender. They were like co-captains. And then Zubizarreta for a season before him. Of course, he's Basque. And then Jose Ramon Alexanco for 5 seasons, who's also Basque. Victor Munoz for a year. And then before that, we're all the way back in the 80s, and we were for Munoz, but Bernd Schuster before that. So the reason I bring that up is in the last 40 years, Barca's first captain has only not been Spanish for, other than Messi, 1.5 years. And as weird as it sounds that Messi's like some adopted Spanish son, he kind of is, as Barcelona and as Catalan as it can be without being Spanish and Catalan and all those things, and being from a different country, having been born there. But the only, we'll say, like non-academy or non-Barcelona or non-Catalan or non-Spanish products were Popescu and Schuster over the last 40 seasons. So it is going to be something different if, when Roberto leaves, you do have Ter Stegen, De Jong, and then because Ron Araujo, I think, is going to feel like he's going to feel like he's, I know he's not from the academy itself, but he's going to feel like he was from there. Even though, again, he came at 19 though, so it's still it's just going to be a different flavor. But I'm not saying anything wrong. I'm saying
it's very different, and it's not just the captains. Like we don't really have any Catalan players right now, or at least we have Eric Garcia, who might not be at the club anymore end of this summer.
And
we have
Romeo.
we have Sergio Roberto and Uriol Romeo, those three, right? So it's a very weird situation, and I'm not sure if in the academy we have anybody anybody who really will like come through and represent well.
Lamine Yamal is from Mataro. Lamine Yamal is from like 15
and Lamine, he can represent Catalonia, of course, and that's great. But he very much represents a new Catalonia, which is very multicultural.
Yep.
But as far as that Catalan identity, he does not represent that.
Yeah, Alex Garrido is also Catalan, but what's his ceiling?
Alex Garrido, but exactly what and Casado and Pimprau. I think
they're all Catalan.
Pau Prim. Is Prim Pau or Pau Prim? Probably the latter, Pau Prim, because Pau is Paul. But we don't know, like, if they're gonna ever make it, right? So it's almost uncharted waters for Barcelona in this sense.
Yeah, but it's as much as uncharted for Barcelona, it's also uncharted for almost all of these other clubs around world football. Because when I look at the other captains at other clubs, especially in the EPL, that it is as global a game as it has ever been in world football, especially in Europe. And again, that all starts with, and the reason I went back to the 80s is because that all starts with the Bosman ruling and just having different players that aren't from that country allowed in your squad. And as that number grew and things are, again, non-EU spots are worked through, and players are from around the world are gaining bigger pronounced roles in these clubs from earlier ages, then it all becomes a possibility. So,
but Barcelona has resisted that for a long time.
For sure.
So in the EPL, it was common for teams to have a bunch of people who, or almost nobody, who was not part of the identity of that club. Look at Chelsea. I think Chelsea and Arsenal have had teams of only non-English people. Manchester United and Liverpool always had like at least a couple of academy players, right? So they always had that link.
They always put those two particularly. Yeah. Arsenal was very French, of course, starting 20 years ago. Arsenal, at least one of their captains was French, usually for 5-10 years there.
And Barcelona, even the even the team that won the first Champions League under Rijkaard, it had Puyol, it had Victor Valdés, Iniesta was there, Olage. You can't get more Catalan than Olage, right? So Xavi was part of that team. So there was always a Catalan core. And I think one of the beautiful things in football, and I'm not a nationalist myself. I don't have a strong national identity because I've lived outside of my country for so long. But I think one of the beautiful things in football is that the identity is part of a club. So it's a shame if Barcelona just becomes another conglomerate multinational vehicle instead of at least having some players who are part of this identity. But
and I do think that Barcelona does have a long leash of that, though, because the academy and players have been in the academy for so long that there is such a thing, very much like Messi. Again, Messi is an adopted son of, in the way that Johan Cruyff was, but Johan Cruyff came as a full adult, but Messi came as a kid. I mean, Ansu Fati feels not necessarily Catalan, but he is an adopted son from the academy. Gabi the same way. It's been
Mm,
a long time. Pedri again arrived at 16, so he will have grown up within the club. And even Araujo,
yes,
as I
this
said,
is true.
19 comes up, so it's like, as much as we say that, like these are players who are become adopted within Barcelona. Like, you cannot imagine now already. You can't imagine Pedri in another jersey already. Like you say, like, okay, that kid needs to be around or be in a Barcelona uniform for 10 years. Like, you just can't expect him anywhere else. So the opposite
This
end of
is
that
true, but I'm
spectrum.
also looking at the
Oh,
point of view of people from Catalonia who go to the stadium and who like to feel that connection with somebody who
sure.
represents their culture and their identity, right? But yeah, let's move on.
Yeah. So we're going to move on to almost the opposite end of the spectrum here because it's funny that Barcelona in the last 2 days have been linked with three names, their last 3 days. João Felix, Kylian Mbappe, and I've seen Manuel Lanzini, rather, the Argentine attacking midfielder. And it's
Hmm.
funny because obviously Kylian Mbappe, we're throwing that out. It's like, it's whatever. It's nothing. João Felix also, I'm throwing that out. I mean, there is obviously that when there's smoke, there's fire, and that is a real thing, but that is a real thing from the João Felix camp, not from the Barcelona camp. So we'll take that seriously when it comes from the Barcelona side of things. But what the João Felix, maybe sure, but the other stuff that I've seen linked, and you're talking about the caliber of midfielder. I saw Kappa, Manuel Lanzini, Oxley Chamberlain, Quintero. It does seem like Xavi wants another living human warm body who identifies an attacking midfielder somewhere down his bench, not to really like help the team, but almost break glass in case of Pedri for this season. But what that does say, if he is still asking for an attacking midfielder of some kind this season, it does mean, one, that he's still looking to play that box midfield despite having five wingers in Ansu, Ferran, Dembele, Rafinha, and now Abde. So who knows of the five who will still be around come September 2nd. And then it also might indicate that Gundogan may play a bit deeper than we expect him to this season, where I think we all kind of anticipated he'd play a bit farther forward, where he's probably most comfortable. But you could actually see him playing a bit deeper in a double, some kind of double pivot with De Jong and or Earl Romeu, or the three of them farther back, and then just a number 10 even attacking midfielder, just one of them, which would be Pedri. And then where does Gabi rotate? And then again, Pedri higher upfield. But I said those candidates that I've heard are very uninspiring. But it does seem to me, and I have something on Earl Romeo I'm cooking up for later in the week. It seems that the rotation with those five is already very, very much set. Where each of them, if they all play about 2,000 minutes, you're already out of minutes for the rest of the midfield. And Xavi is, again, legitimately just saying, I mean, I don't know, like in a perfect world, Fermin Lopez, and maybe that's why you're seeing all this stuff be saying, like, people trying to hype him up and say, hey, Fermin Lopez is really impressing. Because if Xavi doesn't get this, again, warm body at the end of his bench who can be an attacking midfielder, Fermin Lopez is exactly that. He is just kind of a utility attacking midfielder, the classical number 10 who started as a winger, tried to be a center midfielder, but he really is just like an attacking midfielder. And maybe he is that last piece down the bench somewhere this season, and why they're hyping him up, because Xavi's not going to get what he wants.
I mean, if you're looking for a very creative player who can attack, either from attacking midfield or maybe from the left flank, then João Felix is not the worst option in the world, right? Especially if Atleti is stuck with the kid and he doesn't want to negotiate with any other club, and Atleti will absolutely need to get rid of him, because if not, they'll be in trouble themselves with the Liga's fair play rules. So he might become available for a really good price. And would that be the end of the world if we sign Joe Felix? No.
No, but I can't see him.
I
So
was.
I'm having a hard time looking at him as an actual player and not as just an outrageous number. Like, he's one of those players that there's no way that his wages and what it would take to get him from Atletico Madrid in the next, because of how long his contract still runs,
Well,
it just, I don't see how the numbers ever make him make sense. Like,
well, we,
it doesn't, it's not going to work that way.
for one, we don't know his wages. So if it's true that he really wants to come, then he'd be willing to possibly drop his wages in order to go to a club where he wants to go, as opposed to remaining another year under Diego Simeone, where he's not wanted, or maybe having to go to a club where he's that is not ideal for him either. And as far as Atleti is concerned, they're in the same situation as right now. We are talking about selling Frank Cassé for 10, 15 million, whereas his market price should be way higher than 10, 15 million. Why would we be willing to let him go for that price? Well, for the same reason as Atleti will probably end up getting rid of Joao for
Yeah, but I mean,
a lot lower price.
I mean, sure, but I think with the inflated numbers that we're seeing coming, especially, I mean, today and yesterday actually, for a ton of different players, especially from the French league and EPL, from going to Saudi Arabia for very, very inflated transfer fee numbers. I mean, João Felix right now reportedly makes around 15. So even if he drops down to like 10, that does put him around Ansu level, Farron level in terms of wages. Farron makes a little less than that, but it does put him around the Ansu Dembele kind of wages because right now he's just a bit higher than that. He's like a third higher than that. But again, he just signed a contract extension in January of this year, and his contract goes to 2027. So so even if Athletic are willing to like terminate part of that deal to help him come, and the transfer fee is lower, like I can't imagine Atletico Madrid would bite the bullet this year. Like how I would if I'm them and he's really refusing to play or being this difficult, he's got to sit in the stands for a whole year.
They can't afford that.
I mean, they can't, but I just
They
don't
can't
see how
afford that.
Barca. I just
They
don't see
would
how
end up
Barca would
having to
be
get
able
rid
to
of
take
him for the
advantage of it.
wages alone.
But that's
They
what I'm
can't
saying. Like,
afford it.
but neither can Barca. That's what I'm saying. Like, Barca could get him for 12 to 15, but there's no way that João Felix is going to go somewhere for 30 to 40, even if he's pushing for Barca. Like, I mean, not say heck with him, but like with that contract, like, yeah, you're right. But Atleti is in a tough spot. I mean, we've seen a lot of
No, I think 30 to 40. Like if he only wants to negotiate with Barcelona,
yeah.
then it's going to go down right to the wire, and then we're talking, hey, the last days of August, Atleti might panic, and they might end up having to take a loss. They still owe like a bit more than 50 million on amortization
Hmm.
on the kid. So
Yeah.
say Barcelona can get him for 50 million. He's 23 years old. You structure it as a loan deal. I don't think that I think there's a lot more upside than risk that you take. But I think
Yeah.
that
I mean, I'm kind of
I,
down on
I
him.
think I think that possibly Atleti will have to get rid of him for less than 50.
Yeah, I'm kind of
Um,
down on him. I feel like structurally, even if we're going to talk about him as a player, I don't see how he really truly fits Barcelona. Like I don't see how he is the answer. Like yeah, he can play on that left wing, but I just don't see how Barca's system gets the best out of him. Like what the best version of him that I've seen is him playing as a secondary striker in the middle of the field off of a like a Diego Costa or a typical big number 9. And with Vitor Roque, that is where the 30 to 40 million went. And I don't see how Vitor Roque and João Felix would coexist in the same team with again Dembele and Pedri and De Jong. I don't see how all those puzzle pieces fit together, and you don't bring in a player who you have to structure so much of your attack around to get the best out of him. I think that's just too dangerous. Like you just need to say. I mean, that's why like who functionally makes more sense? Like is João Felix or Abde the better player? João Felix, duh. But who might fit Xavi's system and function better? Probably Abde, because what is a left winger for Barcelona supposed to do? Stay wide, dribble, attack, be direct, and that is what he's asking his wingers to do in this system. Especially, and that's kind of what that
um,
left wing was missing.
yeah,
And you could
but if
argue, yes, with the left wing on
but,
the
but,
inside forward, like with Balde, it's different,
but,
but
Exactly. You have Balde bombing up the left flank, and João Felix. If he takes that Gavi role, where he
yeah,
starts where he's more of a false left winger, then he gives us a lot more creativity. I think his work rate at Barcelona will be a lot better than at Atleti, because it's one thing to work for the ball and work like crazy under Diego Simeone, and I think those players, most of them enjoy it. But a player like João Felix, who is creative and likes to have the ball at his feet, does not want to work his ass off 88 minutes to have 10 seconds on the ball. Like that just does not work for him. Whereas in Xavi's system, he I can see that work. I also don't think that he is necessarily a starter. Because we have Ansu, we have Gavi, but I think that he's very young, and that there is potential of him becoming one of the best players in the world. And you don't know if this will be at left wing. You don't know if it will be at in 1 or 2 seasons if he'd end up at false nine. I'm not saying he's a must sign. I'm not saying that hey, we absolutely have to go for him. But I think it could be an extremely interesting option, and I think it's like there are these players where you see him at one club or you see him at two clubs, and it just is not a good fit. Like when Bergkamp was at Inter Milan, he was
Yeah,
miserable. He looked
yeah,
terrible.
good one. Yeah,
When
good one.
Laudrup was at Juventus, it was a
Another good one.
disaster.
Yeah.
And Joao at Atleti, and then I know that he had those 6 months at Chelsea, but you're gonna judge anybody in that freak show over the last 6 months? No,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah. I think the other thought I would have is that you mentioned Ansu. That it, again is another one of those situations where I'm wondering is it Ansu or João Felix? And I still want to know this year what the answer to that will be. Leading like Ansu gets first dibs on deciding whether or not it's Ansu or João Felix, and I would like to see a
Mhm.
whole year of him being able to figure that out. Okay, speaking of now like real things, which are exits from the club. Uh, Langley is still hanging out. Des is still hanging out. João Araujo is still hanging out since last we talked. But Chadi Riad, the talented and not even we don't necessarily we'll say high ceiling, but just he's talented. He has his stuff. He knows what he does. Left-footed center back from Barca Athletic starter last year, as joining Real Betis on a permanent deal. It's a 2.5 million fee up front, which is because Real Betis, again, that number says more about Real Betis than Barcelona. Apparently, there are other installments to come potentially later on based on certain incentives, but the base fee is 2.5 mil because there's all that Real Betis can afford at the moment. And then there's a 50% sell-on clause for Barcelona, which is pretty good. There's also a buyback to bring him back, which is around 7 to 8 mil, which I actually think is pretty good value. Like anything more than like 15 on any of these players, and that includes Nico. Anything I think more than like 15 is just going to be too high, and Barcelona's not going to pay it. Because again, if those players at 21 now are good enough to be sold for some kind of number lower than 8 to 10 or 7 to 8, then why would Barcelona go back for them? Like, how are they going to make those improvements? Nico seems like by the time this hits your ears is definitely off to Porto, but for how much? Those are the questions left. Seems like the number that he's going to be going on a transfer fee is 8 to 10 mil, which actually is pretty reasonable for a player that played about 2 seasons of top flight football for Barcelona and Valencia. So 8 to 10 mil with a big buyback. Again, that one I think it could be 15, and that's another one of those that if it's 15 to 20, Barcelona probably won't be paying it because he's going to be worth just a little bit less than that. But I think that's why Barcelona is negotiating. That's why this one's dragging on, because that buyback, they want it to be reasonable in a way that I think in recent years they've kind of been rinsed on that. Umtiti is joining Lille, which is actually a pretty big move for him. And I'm actually
Oh,
excited
that's
for
confirmed.
Umtiti. That is like 85, 90% I've seen over the line.
All
So
right.
that's like it's almost there. We had the expectation that he was going to return to France, and if Lille's the team that's going to take kind of a flyer on him, because I mean
You
it's
said
cheap
Lyon.
for them.
I understood Lyon.
Oh, Lyon, no, yeah, Lille. And
Okay.
I think Lille's a really good fit. I think that I really like that move. I mean, Lyon would be a return to Lyon, but it seems like and actually Lille finished way higher in Lyon last year in the table. Like Lyon has a reputation, but Lyon did not play up to their reputation the last 2 seasons. And then the last one here, Gustavo Mai, which oh boy, like as I've been hosting this show now long enough where I've had to look at these kids when they sign, and then I say goodbye to them a few years later. And
Yeah,
this
Gustavo
one,
by
yeah, this one's rough. He was bought and came to Barca B a few seasons ago.
four
Contract
and a half
terminated
mil, right?
now. Huh?
4.5 mil they paid for him, right?
Yeah, it was 4.5 mil. He still had a contract until June of 2025. That is
Mm,
outrageous. He signed in 2020 on a 5-year deal
I mean,
from Sao Paulo, and yeah, he played one season with Barca B at the time back in
yeah,
2020. Then he spent a half a season on loan and International de Porto Alegre and back in Brazil until December 2022. And then he last season was another half season after sitting out on loan for Valencia Mestalla, which is their B team, and that really didn't work out either. Like he barely played for the second team of Valencia. He barely played for the lowest level of the Brazilian top league. So he wasn't playing for one of the giants like Palmeiras or Corinthians or anything like that. He was like lower down the table, but he was barely getting minutes there. He would sit out half a season before he finally got something to work out. And now he's going to continue his career at a Brazilian club, Vila Nova FC, which I have to like Google before. I'm not too well versed in Brazilian football outside of the top level. So yeah, Vila Nova FC. I mean, good luck to him. But boy,
Right.
I mean, he didn't play for the first team, and because if he did, that would go down as one of the all-time like stinker signings if he had signed for the first team.
Hmm.
But to your point, he signed for 4.5 mil, which is first team transfer money, even though he signed for the B team.
Yeah. But how old was he when we signed him?
I
He was young.
believe he
He
was
was like 19.
19. Yeah, I think he was 19. That sounds right.
So I mean, you get a bunch of 19-year-olds from South America and sign him for the B team, which there's all kinds of things that is wrong with that for big European clubs who can just sign players from the other side of the world for the B team. But
Agreed.
I mean, if you look at it, instead of spending I don't know 50 million on one player who may or may not work out, or for I don't know 35 million plus a 15 million Ballon d'Or clause for Andre Gomez. You spend maybe 4.5 million on Maya, which okay is terrible. You spend another 2 million on some kid from Boca Juniors. You spend another 2 million on some Brazilian kid. You spend 1.9 million on some guy from Uruguay who nobody knows and now goes by the name of Ronaldo Araujo and is the future captain, future first
Sure.
captain of our club, and it's all worth it because it's easy to criticize those deals when they go wrong, but you're not going to get all of them right.
Yeah. The tough thing about this one, along with the Mateo Fernandez one from a few seasons ago,
No, 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 that was horrible.
well, what I was
That
going to
one was
say
horrible.
is I remember when Gustavo Maya was first signed, the word commission was used way too often. Apparently, there were some commissions behind the scenes on this, and his name has been floated with we'll say it's what we call the Bartomeu Brazilians, where there were ones that Bartomeu got extra commissions from, and it's some seedy stuff, and it's gone all the way back to the Santa Rosal time with when it came to like the Brazilian
Mm,
commissions and things like that.
okay.
So yeah, I don't know. It's
Yeah,
it's
that's not
it's
good.
unfortunate but yeah, best of luck to the player. I hope he can figure it out. I hope more than anything, I always want he's still 22, so I just hope he plays. Like I hope he can play his way into being a regular for again. I'll bring it up either Palmeiras or another club or even in Liga MX, like somewhere like there by 26, 27. Just stay in South America for the rest of his career, make some money, take care of himself of being a professional footballer. That is what we want for all these kids. Totally agree. Okay, so last two things here. I mean, I guess the last thing is like a big thing about the preseason, but last little nugget here is the rest of the Liga because for Barcelona and of course Real Madrid has brought in some big money players, sure, but the rest of the Liga are still kind of hemorrhaging players. Chukwueze is gone from Villarreal off to AC Milan, so Villarreal has lost him. They've also lost Jackson as well, so another one of their young promising forwards. They're going to have to replace somehow from usually a problem within. And then Sergio Canales at 32 is heading to Monterrey in Mexico from Real Betis. He'll actually get a pay increase with the move, which again, I'm not continuing to try to drag Real Betis, but they're in financial trouble. They're having a lot of trouble registering players, even more so than Barcelona this time around. And so Sergio Canales and 32. I mean, Liga MX is a fine league for him. It may be as much as it feels like a little bit of a step down. He accomplished most of what he was going to accomplish at Real Betis, you'd have to say. And yeah, for him to get a pay increase, yeah, go get it, Sergio Canales. That's fine. The sad news is David Silva has reportedly torn his ACL and will likely be retiring from football. And that is a sad end to I don't want to throw the word legend around, but a legend of Spanish football. Like I know he played a lot for Man City, but between his time at Valencia and not so much his time at Real Sociedad, but his time even with the Spanish national team, just being a representative of the Spanish midfield, David Silva was, yeah, I want to use the word legend here. And then finally, Kang In Lee, young South Korean midfielder slash attacker, leaves Mallorca, going to PSG, believe it or not, actually. So I guess a pretty big step, pretty big move up for him. But yeah, so Chukwueze, Canales, David Silva, and Kang In Lee. So all different ends of the spectrum, young, old, mainly attackers, mainly exciting, mainly players I really enjoyed to watch. So yeah, it's a shame that in all of these different ways, Liga just it seems like they continue to lose talent at too unfortunately high a rate in the last few seasons.
And it's crazy, right? Because okay, so um, the Premier League is the Premier League. Ligue 1, France. Well, everybody just goes to Paris Saint-Germain.
Yeah.
That's not a league. That's Paris Saint-Germain, who somehow still manages to make it competitive because they're too arrogant to play football half the time. Then you have Bundesliga, and Bayern buy players, and Dortmund will also, like, they'll sell somebody for 120 million, and then they'll make a couple of 30 million signings. And you have what is it, Red Bull Leipzig?
Yeah, RB Leipzig,
Yeah,
and then in the last
RB
few
Leipzig,
seasons,
who
yeah.
they also sign players, and they can sign somebody from um, mid-table Spanish teams sometimes,
Mm-hmm.
or at least they have that financial muscle. But other than that, they don't have clubs who can really sign players from La Liga. Then you have Italy. I mean, Milan, Inter. Yeah, for Milan to sign a player from Villarreal, that's not insane.
No.
I mean, Milan is a historical club, and Italy has a bunch of clubs that should be able to sign um, from the likes of Villarreal based on their reputation. So let's also like keep that perspective. At the same time, I believe in the fair play rules. I think the problem of the fair play rules is that Spain is the only one who 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 have fair play rules. Nobody else seems to care at all. Um, the alternative is for Spanish clubs to just go further and further and further in debt. I mean, imagine if Bartomeu were allowed to continue the
Mm-hmm.
way that he was doing,
Yeah, João Felix would have been signed 2 days ago.
or we would not exist anymore.
Yeah.
So I don't think the fair play rules are necessarily a bad thing. I think is has football has completely lost its soul. Football is more than ever ruined by money, and it's gotten to the point where that money no longer acts in the interest of football, but it acts very much against the interest of this game that we all love. Um, and I don't know what the antidote is.
Yeah.
I
I
don't
mean, because whatever the
I don't know. Like, you can say, well, Tebas should be more flexible and allow clubs to sign more. Yeah, sure, but how much more is more? Because the clubs are not financially healthy. The reason
yeah.
that they cannot sign is not because those fair play rules um, invent restrictions that their financial health um, would not otherwise, like,
Yeah. Well, I mean,
impose on them if the clubs were managed reasonably.
yeah, I mean, I think outside investment's also a huge discussion point in Spain because like Real Betis has pushed against outside investment before in the past, and they're in the trouble they're in. But it's weird because it's like I'd rather be in the trouble that I'm in my own house, like with the people that I know and trust, that we got ourselves in this mess, we're going to get ourselves out, as opposed to doing what Peter Lim is doing at Valencia, where you
Exactly.
get that outside investment. They milk your club, and then eventually Peter Lim's going to say, "I don't want to play with this anymore. This is an old toy. This is dirty to me." And Valencia is going to be relegated, and Valencia is going to be in a lot. I mean, it's crazy that such an historic club is going to be. Like, this story is not over. Like, this story is going to get worse for Valencia before it gets
Yeah,
better. Is my pretty reasonable prediction. And you do
yeah,
have
and
clubs like
Peter Lim, like everybody, all of the Valencia fans want him out,
yeah,
and Peter Lim, or I think his daughter, literally came out and said, like, we do not care what you want. This is our club now. You don't get a say in it.
hmm yeah,
It's
it's a vanity project. So I mean, that's a real question for Spanish football in general. It's like, do you want that outside investment coming in to try to save you, or I mean, even like Almeria. Almeria, over the course of 3 years, they were bought by a huge foreign investment company that was what 3 years ago, and they pumped way more talent and money into the second division than anyone's ever seen. It takes them 2 years to come up to the first division. And then you've already seen like they're still getting some investment, but now they're getting investment more 1-to-1, and they're playing by the Liga's rules, and they become an average financial club again in the Liga because that investment is already starting to be pulled. And yeah, that's risky business for all of these. I mean, again, it's risky business for Chelsea and Inter Milan in the same way that it is for Mallorca, again, who also had like outside foreign investment and things like that. Okay, yeah. So yeah, the Liga, I agree with you. I don't know what the antidote is. Any antidote is a lot of different things. It's very complex and very, and will take a lot of time. Like the timeline is not like, oh, one rule is going to fix everything. It's again, I go back to the Bosman ruling that we think about all the time. It's like the unintended consequences of the Bosman ruling of 1994. Like we don't know what the world's going to look like even in 10 years, 5 years, how technology changes, how, how the world's going to change, how different resources are. I mean, that's what the global market is. It's resources, like how different resources can be valued. Like it's absurd to try to consider what's going to solve a problem when there's so many things. And I know we're just talking about like the Liga finances, but there's a lot of money. Like that it's still, even though Liga is not as rich as the Premier League, you're still talking of billions of euros that are changing hands year to year.
You know what is going to help La Liga?
Is this your transition to talk about Messi and Busquets and Alba at Inter Miami? I hope it is.
No.
No, okay.
Mbappe going to Madrid.
Yeah, I think that's true.
That's going to be a boost for La Liga economically,
it is.
and reputationally. So Mbappe going to Madrid, it's actually good for Barcelona as well.
Yeah, and I'm not scared of him. So bring it.
No. Neither
am
I.
So yeah, let's end the show real quick with and by real quick, I mean these are hard questions, but I'm going to let you kind of play in the sandbox with them and see what you can come up with. So here's a question for Xavi heading into the preseason, and with Arsenal on Wednesday. Again, for a programmer note, I don't know how much of that I'll be doing a headline for. I'm always pretty honest here, so I'm getting some teeth pulled tomorrow. So I may be out of commission for the rest of the week or beyond. They're actually important teeth, so you can say goodbye to some of the things in my mouth. And I don't know what shape I'll be in. I'm going to try to do some pre-recorded stuff, but I'm already a little late on that. So yeah, I hope that these questions kind of sustain you for the next week or two if they need to. So Levon, let's start with this one. Questions for Xavi heading into preseason. Who will get the most minutes at the, and I put quotes around this, pivot position this season?
This season?
Because Nico got the most during the preseason last year. So that's why I'm like, this season.
I was saying preseason or season?
I'm saying season. Because again, Nico Gonzalez got the most pivot preseason minutes last year, and Frenkie de Jong played center back and bench. So the preseason doesn't hold much water.
Frankie.
Okay. Yeah. That's how we're gonna answer these, and we're gonna keep going through them. So, can Ansu Fati or Ferran Torres rebound this season? And what do you think that looks like?
Them rebounding, playing well, scoring. That's what it looks like. And yes, of course they can. Will they is another question, but they can.
I'm gonna go through my predictions later, but for Ansu, if I'm gonna be high on his rebounding, I'm gonna say 15 to 18 goals, 18 at the highest. 15 is reasonable. And a reminder that he had double digits last year, and that was considered a down year. So Ansu is going to be, a rebound, like a real strong rebound, where it's like, oh, Ansu's 85% back of who we know. That's like 20 goals. All right, who will play right back the second most after Jules Koundé this season? And I almost have to say, like, Ronald Araujo actually doesn't count here in case he does. So not who's not named Ronald Araujo.
Sergio Roberto.
Which is totally reasonable. Yeah, that's totally reasonable. Will Abde be around in the second week of September?
No.
I think I agree with you on that too. I think, I'm just going over the forwards. There's just too many reasons why everyone else isn't leaving. And so that's something against Abde. I think, again, it's a lot of these decisions aren't made based on who they are as a player, but who they are as a number. The same with Nico Gonzalez. Like, Nico is a player that is useful for Barcelona, but he's also, he's worth 8 to 10 million euros with a buyback. So if he winds up being that good, then Barcelona will go get him when Romeo and Gundogan are too old. And that's the case. Other end of the spectrum, too young. How much of a role will Lamine Yamal play this season, you think?
he might surprise people and get significant minutes.
How many? Yeah.
Apparently he's killing it. I mean, and enough that we actually see him play and get to know him as a player.
Mm, yeah. Okay. Instead of just like, oh, that look at that young player, he's exciting. Da 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 da. You can actually say these are what he does well. This is what he doesn't do well
Yeah,
at top level, and here's how he needs to improve. But very much like the first year. I mean, Gabi was an actual first team rotation player in his first season, and I don't think Lamine will be that. But yeah, we'll
no,
have to see. So how do
no,
the last question here?
less
Yeah,
than Gavi, but more than
yeah, what's another
um
good example?
uh, what's an example? Um, let's say I don't see him getting a lot of starts, but I do see him make more than 5 appearances.
Hmm. Yeah, I'm almost thinking of like a almost like an Iniesta in his first season, like going way back. Like again, people can't understand Anderson Iniesta isn't Anderson Iniesta, but I believe he played like 14 times his first season, like which was like an unofficial season. But I think he did 14 the first year,
Mhm.
like 26 the next year, and even at that point, he was still like expected to go on loan at like Rangers or something when he was
Yeah,
20, 21 years old.
I don't
But
know
yeah,
if he's
that's
going to get 14 appearances because he's only 16, but
right. But he's 16. He is going to sign that contract, so you're good to
yeah,
go. Good on that. All right, and then lastly here, how do the new signings you think fit into that rotation? Again, this is a question that I will be, well, in the case at least of Gundogan and Orel Romeu, I'm going to be answering this in grave detail. So look out for that later in the week. I've already punched the numbers on the minutes. But how do you think the new signings fit into this rotation? With the, I guess, a very simplified version of everyone just does Gala 11s. Everyone just says who are the starters and how do you fill in from there. But I don't think that's how it's going to be this year. And that's how it shouldn't be
yeah.
this year. But I mean, do you think one of these new signings, I think the inverse of that is, can you see Gundogan or Romeu, who am I missing? Inigo Martinez, do you think that one of them is just going to like not really play, just kind of like just be there?
No, they will all get minutes.
Hmm.
They will all get minutes. Uriel Romeo, I have no idea. Because I haven't honestly haven't watched him play that much. So I've seen the analysis of people who have followed him, and yeah, maybe he brings balance. My biggest question about Oriol Romeu is, um, he's not as good of a defender as Busquets, and he's not as good on the ball as Busquets. So why would he start unless tactically the way that he defense helps the rest of the team, which I suspect is probably going to happen at least in some matches, right? So it's going to be very interesting. I'm very curious how this works out. But everybody thinks that Busquets is a poor defender, so by extension, because Romeo is not strong offensively, people will assume that Romeo is a better defender than Busquets. But
Yeah.
because that's how people think.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Very, very literally. Yep.
yeah, but he only wins like 25% of his duels,
Hmm.
which is insane
Yeah.
for somebody who you would think can start at the holding midfield position in Barcelona. And I'm a little bit worried about that. But let's see.
Yeah. I mean, it does a little teaser for again later in the week when I fully break down Romeu. He played 2,950 minutes last year for Girona. That is 400 minutes than any other midfielder for Barcelona. That is also 100 more minutes than Lewandowski played last season. He would have been the highest outfield player minutes for all of FC Barcelona last season. And so, what Oro Busquets does more than anything else that I've known
Oriol
since like
Romeo.
Oro Romeo, I mean, is that he eats up minutes. That is what he does. He eats up minutes and just gobbles them up, almost in a way. I know it's like redactive, but almost in a way like Gabi does, where you ask over the course of 60 minutes, you're like, what does Gabi do? What is the point of Gabi? And Orvimeo, I think, having watched enough Girona last year to say, like, what he does is that he makes sure that Alex Garcia, he makes sure that Rigo Raquelme look good. He makes sure that those guys can have an impact on the game. And that is his job. That is his purpose. That is his function. That is why Xavi wanted him. So my biggest question is, does Romeu make Pedri good? Does he make Gabi good? Does he make Frankie de Jong good? Are those players allowed to express themselves 100% with the trust that someone is behind them? Whether he's intercepting balls, whether he is starting play, whether he is stepping between the center backs and building up, regardless of what his position is, he's a pivot. So what is the nature of that job? That job is to enhance the others around him. And I think last year in particular, that is why that for midfield, that's why they switched to that. Because Busquets, for all the criticism he got, Frankie de Jong looked good last year. And that is a credit to Busquets more than any other player. Pedri became Barcelona's, to me, most important player. And again, who was the midfielder who was standing right behind him every time? It was Busquets. So if Romeu can do 80% of that, and you add Gundogan to that rotation, and I'm not saying replace Gundogan with Gabi in some kind of box midfield perfect 11, but if it is a healthy dose of Romeu when called upon, because again, I don't want to give away the numbers, but anyway, I assume that he's going to play quite a few minutes, and I could also see him very well getting the fifth most minutes behind De Jong, Gabi, Gundogan, Pedri. And then Xavi kind of, where do I need him? When do I need him? How do I need him? So I'm not actually plugging him in as some kind of consummate starter, but I think he will be important over the course of a season, which again is, people don't want to hear this, that it takes a course of a season, a lot happens. Injuries happen. Barca played 3 games last year with their Gala 11. So I would say just strap in. It's a long season. There are ebbs and flows, injuries, players come in and out, and you never know what's going to happen. But Levon, I think this season more than last year feels more controlled. Obviously, even with the Messi stuff at the start of this year, that wasn't a real thing this summer. It was decided pretty quickly. Rip the Band-Aid off, whatever. And I just feel like, I think this season is a full second year of Xavi. So it's the year and a half. So now it's the first official year of season number 2 with him preseason. And it feels like things are normal. And that is okay. At least today, on Monday, the 24th at 5:41 p.m. on the Monday, it feels normal, and that's a great thing.
Here.
Yeah. All right. So again, you can follow him on Twitter or X, or I hope you can still follow him, whatever the heck it's called. Then you can follow us everywhere else at the Barcelona Pod: Facebook, Patreon, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, merch store, all that different stuff. Again, look out for additional content. Maybe it's from past me, maybe it's from, I don't know, future me, whoever is going to be giving you stuff later in the week and then next week as well as I continue to recover. So thanks so much for listening to the show. Until next time, we'll talk to you soon. Forza Barca.
Forza Barca.